Thank you very much. It's a delight to be with you tonight. Of course, at my age, it's a delight to be anywhere. You probably wonder, how old is that guy from that introduction there? So you don't have to add up the figures, figure well, so many years here and so many years there. I'm 77. It's a nice, perfect number. Actually, when I turned 50, it was traumatic. I was on my way to Australia, and you pass the international date line, you have two 50th birthdays. Now, one's enough, but two is depressing. My wife looked at me and said, "Honey, don't be discouraged. You're going to live to be 100. I said, "How do you know?" She said, "You look half dead already." So with that encouragement, I've been pressing on to my second half century here. I do have one wife of 54 years, and she deserves a hand. We have 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. It's called Planned Parenthood. It's hard to make them come out even. We named them all Bible names, of course. The girls with R's, Ruth, Rhoda, Rachel. And the boys, we started with D's. David and Daniel were doing fine. Third boy came along. We said, let's see, another boy's name from the Bible that begins with D. Demetrius, Diotrephes, Demas, devil. We thought that several times. So we called him Paul. Just kind of dropped the line on the D and make it P. Someone said to my wife, "What are you going to call him?" She said, "We're going to call him Quits. That's what we're going to do." We had so many kids, I was afraid to come home and say, "What's new, dear?" I'm glad to see you have a sense of humor. My son said, "Dad, your humor starts low and it goes down from there, so this is the best you get." When I was teaching at Dallas Seminary, I asked my class, what is the greatest problem in the world today? Is it ignorance or is it apathy? And one of the students said, "I don't know and I don't care." Unfortunately, that is the greatest problem in the world today. But as we defend the Christian faith, the greatest 3 problems in the world today are naturalism, relativism, and pluralism. And I'll be speaking on 2 of those, relativism tonight, pluralism tomorrow. Naturalism, relativism, and pluralism. I was speaking at a church in California a number of years ago, and I asked the pastor what he wanted me to preach on. He said, "Well, I should tell you, give us an exposition of some passage of Scripture, but to tell you the truth, our people don't believe in truth even. Could you talk about truth?" Now, it makes no sense to get up and say to people what Jesus said, "Thy word is truth," if you believe in a relative view of truth. It makes no sense to tell them, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free," John chapter 8, unless truth is absolute. It makes no sense to say, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me," if Jesus is not the absolute truth, because they go away thinking, "Well, that's true for you, and that's wonderful for you, but that's not necessarily true for everyone." Truth is under fire today, and I'd like to talk about it. I want to talk about what is truth, can truth be known, and is truth absolute? I don't know if I have a poem, but I have 3 points, so we'll start with the first one. What is truth? Pilate asked the right question. He was sneering, he was cynical, but nonetheless it was the right question. Ironically, the truth was standing before him. But what is truth? Well, truth is what tells it like it is. If I say that I have a Bible in my right hand, it's true because I'm telling it like it is. There is a Bible in my right hand. Truth is what corresponds to the facts. If I say this is a bottle of water, it's true because in fact this is a bottle of water. Truth corresponds to the facts. Or truth matches its object. If I say this is a table here with a black cloth on it, it's true because there is an object here called a table with a black cloth. So what we have is not tricky. Truth is simply telling it what is the case. This object is a table, is a true statement because it points to a table and therefore is a correct statement. Now, what is false? Well, false is what does not tell it like it is, does not correspond to the facts, and does not match its object. The opposite of true is false. You say, well, this is Philosophy 101. Unfortunately, this is where we have to start today because people don't know what truth is. And they've been exposed to so many different views of truth that they don't realize that truth is found in correspondence to reality. Here's the truth about truth. Truth is what corresponds to reality. There is a real world out there, and if you make a statement that is correct about it, you're making a true statement because it corresponds to the object. The correspondence view of truth cannot be denied without using it. Try and deny that truth is what corresponds to reality. Those who deny it assume their view is corresponding to reality. So you can't deny the correspondence view of truth without using the correspondence view of truth. It's literally undeniable. In reality, everyone holds to a correspondence view of truth. Everyone, whether they know it or not or know the term, everyone holds to it, and that's the view of truth that we must defend today. Those who deny it in theory use it in practice. Now let me illustrate it. Suppose someone says, I can't speak a word in English. You would respond, isn't that in English? That's what we call a self-defeating statement. I can't speak a word in English is spoken in English, so it destroys itself because it practices exactly the opposite of what it's preaching. What if someone says truth is not telling it like it is? I don't accept your view of truth. Just ask him, is that claiming to tell it like it is? If he's claiming to tell it like it is, then truth is telling it like it is, and you can't deny that truth is telling it like it is without making the statement that you claim is telling it like it is. Arguments for the correspondence view of truth from the Bible. It's implied in the 9th commandment, you shall not bear witness. Don't tell anything that misrepresents the facts. That implies the correspondence view of truth. It's also entailed in Acts 24 when it says, you can learn the truth when you verify the facts. You want to know what's true? Just go and verify the facts. That's a correspondence view of truth. It is manifest in Genesis 42:16 when Joseph said, they should look at the facts so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. How do you know if it's true? Look at the facts and you will see. It was employed in the test of a false prophet, whose prophecy was considered false if the word does not come to pass or come true. If it doesn't come like you said it was going to come and you didn't forecast it like it is, you're not telling the truth. It's utilized in everyday conversation when we consider something false if it misrepresents the facts. For example, we say, check the facts and check it out for yourself and the like. All of that means that we believe exactly what the Bible implies here, that truth is what corresponds to reality. It is essential to legal oath when one promises to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Nothing but a correspondence view of truth would work in court, and nothing would be accepted except a correspondence view of truth. Now let me answer a few objections to this before I go on to show how that is absolute. Objection 1. Jesus said, I am the truth, not I correspond to the facts. Isn't that contradictory? Isn't Jesus' use of truth there not a correspondence view of truth? No, Jesus' lips and life perfectly corresponded to reality. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. I'm the perfect representation of the Father. The Logos represents the Theos. Indeed, the Logos was the Theos. Jesus' lips and life perfectly correspond to reality. Persons can represent truth as well as propositions. It doesn't have to be a proposition to be true. It can be a gesture. If you ask me, which way did he go, and I do that, I told the truth. I expressed the truth by a gesture without a word. Objection 2. God is truth according to the Bible, and he does not correspond to any reality beyond himself. Well, let me respond by saying God is the source of all truth, and his words and actions correspond to his nature. Thus, God is true to himself. This is perfect correspondence. God is God, and everything he does corresponds to what he is. Everything he says corresponds to what he is. And he's the source of all truth. So that doesn't deny the correspondence view of truth. The truth is that truth is what corresponds to reality. Now, secondly, can truth be known? Can truth be known? Well, let me answer some of the opponents to truth. The relativists deny absolute truth. The agnostic deny knowing any truth. The skeptic doubts all truth. Postmoderns affirm no truth. Let's take a look at them one by one. Agnosticism, truth about reality is unknowable. Immanuel Kant was the one who held this. He wrote a 700-page book, The Critique of Pure Reason, in which he said, you just can't know. Reality is unknowable. He said we can't know truth about reality. We can only know appearance, not reality, just the phenomena, not the noumena. We can't know the thing in itself, only the thing to us. And his book is one of the great classics of all time, and since his time, in the early 1800s, has been very common in Western thought to accept this gulf that Kant built here. We must remain agnostic about reality. What do we say to that statement, no one knows the truth? Then how do you know that's true? If no one knows the truth, how do you know that's true? We were using the evangelism explosion technique, and we knocked on a door one night from our church, and we said, hello, my name's Norm, my friend is Ron here. Would you mind if I ask you a serious spiritual question? The gentleman at the door said, no, go ahead. And I said, if you were to die tonight and stand before God, and God would say, why should I let you into my heaven, what would you say? And he said, I would say to God, why shouldn't you let me in? It's not in the book. He threw a curve. There are two answers. That's not one of the two answers. Now we're standing there. What do we do? That's the problem with all these techniques, you know. It's supposed to say A or B, and they say C. So I ushered up a quick prayer, like Exodus 4:12, now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth and teach thee what thou shalt say. So I ushered up a quick prayer, and this is what God gave me to say to him. I wasn't smart enough to think this up. I said, Don, if we knocked on your door and you didn't want to let us in your house, and I said to you, why shouldn't you let me into your house, what would you say? He said, I would tell you where to go. I said, that's exactly what God's going to tell you. Suddenly he got serious. Now he got serious, and he said, well, to tell you the truth, I don't believe in God. Well, at least I know where he is. I mean, if somebody doesn't believe in God, you can see what's wrong with our techniques today. You need to do pre-evangelism before you can do evangelism. You can't start with that question. That assumes there's a God. It assumes there's a heaven. You know, it assumes a lot of things. And he didn't believe any of that. So I said, let me ask you this. Do you know absolutely for sure there is no God? He said, no, you can't know anything with absolute certainty. I said, then there might be a God, right? There might be a God. He said, well, yeah, there might be. I said, good. You're not an atheist, you're an agnostic. Because the atheist says, I know there is no God, and the agnostic says, I don't know if there's a God. He said, well, I'm an agnostic. So we made progress, you know, just one question. We went from atheism to agnosticism. I said, now, what kind of agnostic are you? He said, well, how many kinds are there? I said, there are two. There are two. There's the ordinary kind that says, I don't know if there's a God. And then there's the ornery kind that says, you can't know if there's a God. Sure enough, he was the ornery kind. And I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you know for sure that you can't know anything for sure? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, if you know for sure that you can't know anything for sure, then you know something for sure. If you know something for sure, you're not an ornery agnostic. You're just an ordinary garden variety agnostic that doesn't know. He said, well, I guess you're right. I'm just an ordinary agnostic. So we've gone from atheism to hard agnosticism to soft agnosticism. And then I said to him, do you want to know? Would you like to look at some evidence? Gave him a book. Frank Morrison, who was an agnostic, wrote a book, Who Moved the Stone? He was converted in the process of writing it. The first chapter read the book that refused to be written, gave him the book, came back, said, "What did you think?" He said, "Very, very convincing." And then we had a chance to lead him to Christ. He's a deacon in a Baptist church in Festus, Missouri. And guess what he does? He drives a Sunday school bus and picks up little kids like my little church picked me up when I was 9 years old from an unsaved family after going for 400 times and committed my life to Christ. You just can't say no one knows the truth, or you wouldn't know that that was true. A response to agnosticism. It fails because it's self-defeating. By claiming to know the truth about reality, that we can't know any truth about reality. Well, if you claim to know that truth about reality, then truth can be known about reality. What about skepticism? David Hume. Doubt all truth. We should doubt everything about reality. We can know only our sense data. We should suspend judgment on all truth claims about reality. David Hume died in 1776. What do you say to David Hume? Well, first of all, skepticism fails because either it is self-defeating by claiming we should be skeptical about everything, including skepticism. Why not be skeptical about skepticism? Why not doubt your doubts? So either it's self-defeating, or else it begs the question by claiming that doubt is the only thing that should not be doubted. See, the problem with an agnostic is he's not agnostic enough. He's not agnostic about agnosticism. The problem with the skeptic, he isn't skeptical enough. He's not skeptical about skepticism. Skepticism fails because it is either self-defeating, or else it begs a question by claiming about doubt. René Descartes was the father of modern philosophy. He said, "I think." Well, he really said, "I doubt, therefore I think, therefore I am." Now, he had it mixed up because you have to exist before you can think or doubt. So he really got Descartes before Deshorse. But nonetheless, he did have a good argument here, and that is that doubt leads to certainty. Descartes argued that the more I doubt, the more I'm sure that I'm doubting. And the more I'm sure that I'm doubting, the more I'm certain that I exist. Just try and doubt yourself out of existence. The more you doubt, the more you be sure you're doubting. The more you're sure you're doubting, the more you're sure that you exist. Hence, doubt leads to certainty. St. Augustine found this in his own life. Descartes was a methodological doubter, but Augustine was an actual doubter, and he wrote a book telling how he came out of this against the academics. Postmodernism makes no truth claims. Jacques Derrida, Foucault, and others. We must deconstruct all truth claims. Anybody makes a truth claim, just deconstruct it. We can reconstruct as many views as possible. Just reconstruct your own view after you deconstruct that view. No reconstruction is objectively true, it's merely new. So you just keep reconstructing, and this is the world in which we live today, postmodernism. Now, what do we respond? Postmodernism fails because either it claims to be true and is thereby self-defeating, either it claims postmodernism is true and you should believe it, which is self-defeating because you can't know the truth, even including that truth, or else it makes no truth claim, and it's not even in the ball game. If you go to the New Age section of a library or bookstore, you'll usually find some books by Alan Watts. Alan Watts was converted from a kind of nominal form of Christianity to Zen Buddhism. And according to Zen Buddhism, you can't know the ultimate reality called the Tao. You can't know it because it goes beyond thought, it goes beyond right or wrong, beyond true or false. It's not subject to that. So someone said to him once, well, isn't that self-defeating? Aren't you saying, I know a truth about the Tao that no truth can be known about the Tao? And he said, no, I'm not making a truth claim. They said, well, then why do you write books? And his answer was, birds fly and authors write. That's right. That was his answer. Birds fly and authors write. I'm not making a truth claim. I'm just writing. Well, now, if he told us on the front page, there is no truth in this book, you won't get absolutely any truth from reading it, we'd never have bought it and read it, right? The fact that he wrote the book and was sharing his ideas of how he went from a false view, Christianity, to a true view, Zen Buddhism, tells us that he really did believe in truth. But if they want to insist they aren't making a truth claim, then they're not even in the ball game. They're not even in the park. They're not even in the place where they can play the game of truth. Ignoring the truth, however, does not make it go away. For instance, ignoring a train's coming will not make the train go away. In fact, the Truth Express will run you over. What is truth? It's what corresponds to reality. Can truth be known? Yes, you can't escape it. You're making claims. Is truth absolute? That's the $1 million question. Alfred North Whitehead, the father of modern process theology, son of an Anglican minister, said all truth is relative. Reality has no unchanging forms. All truth is in process and never fails, built upon the ancient Heraclitean view that no man steps into the same river twice, which Heraclitus said, and later Cratylus said no one steps in the same river once because the river isn't there either. It's just moving constantly. Reality is constantly changing. All truth is changing and relative. Now, how do we respond to the relativism of our day? It does no good to simply say, I believe in absolute truth. It does no good to simply quote, Jesus said he is the truth. We got to do pre-evangelism, and we got to talk about the nature of truth, that truth is what corresponds to reality, and that truth is absolute before the gospel even makes sense to them, because we're proclaiming an absolute message in a relativistic day. We're proclaiming an exclusivist message in a pluralist day, and they just filter it through their filters, and it comes out relative and pluralistic. How do we respond? Relativism fails because it either affirms that relativism is absolutely true, which is self-defeating, or it claims that it's just another relative statement and not binding on everyone. So either they have to back off their claim that relativism is true, or it destroys itself. Either relativism is only true for the relativist and not true for everyone, or else it's true for everyone. But if it's true for everyone, then it's not a relativism. It's claiming to be the absolute truth for everyone. Let me put it very simply. There is no absolute truth, our skeptical professor says. And we answer, is that absolutely true? Because if he's claiming there's no absolute truth, you want to know whether that's absolutely true. If it's not absolutely true, then there might be some absolute truth. And if it is absolutely true, there is absolute truth, that one that you just claimed. It's true for you, but not for me. Now, if you haven't heard this, you got your proverbial ostrich head in the sand, and the world is going right by you. It's true for you, but not for me. Is that just true for you, or is that true for me too? You see, if you make the statement, nothing is true for everyone, then just ask them, is that statement true for everyone? Because if that statement is true for everyone, then something is true for everyone, and that's an absolute truth. So they cannot escape absolute truth. This is more fun than a Sunday school picnic. Once you figure out how to do this, you can line them up and knock them down. I mean, they are all self-defeating. Now, I want to prove to you in the next 5 minutes that we all assume, everybody assumes the objectivity and knowability of truth. Everybody assumes that truth is absolute. For example, in the realm of safety, if your little precious little baby is in the back seat and the seat belt is buckled in solidly and somebody pulls right in front of you, you slam on the brakes, and the buckle breaks and the baby is injured, or God forbid the baby dies, there's going to be a lawsuit. And when the company says, well, we feel down in the depths of our heart that our products are good and safe, you don't care how they feel, right? You want to know, is it absolutely true that that was a safe product? Did the buckle come unbuckled that you didn't push it in, or did it rip, which happened? You want to know the absolute truth when it comes to your baby in the back seat. No one would settle for relative truth. Money, suppose you have $500 in the bank account, and you go up there and the teller says, you got 50. You say, well, it's true for her. Must be just 50, right? No, you won't settle for relative truth when it comes to your money. And the more zeros behind it, the less you're prone to settle for it. How about medicine? I was dying in the hospital west of Asheville a couple of years ago. I had a kidney stone. I used lithotripsy on it to break it up, and it caused sepsis, and 50% of the people die of sepsis on the spot. I zapped out for 3 hours, shut down all the organs in my body, caused a heart attack. I'm dying in the hospital there on the weekend, and I got all of these tubes coming in, and then the vultures sweep in. If you're a nurse or doctor, no offense, but the bloodletters come in at night. And I had one on my right hand and one on my left hand, and they looked at me and they said, what's your name? I said, you tell me. Before you take any more blood out of me, stick any more pills in my mouth, I want to make sure you know who I am. On my right hand was a pink band that said Gillespie. On my left hand was a pink band that said Geisler. I said, now you tell me. And I want to know, is Gillespie dying? Did he take my medicine? Is he dying? Am I living? Am I getting the wrong medicine? And believe me, if they had mixed up the medicines, there would have been a lawsuit, right? And we'd want to know the absolute truth. Was it Geisler that got Geisler's medicine, the Gillespie that got his, or vice versa? Everybody believes in the absolute truth when it comes to medicine. How about relationships? Well, she's cheating on me. Well, she doesn't think she is. Doesn't matter. He's cheating on me. He doesn't think he is. Is he? Or is he not? Doesn't matter how they feel or think. When it comes to relationships, you want to know for sure. You don't believe in anything but the absolute truth. How about court proceedings? Have you ever heard of somebody going to court, the judge says, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the relative, the whole relative, and nothing but the relative, so help you future experience? Would never be accepted, would it, in court? Because you got to tell the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth in court proceedings. Everyone really believes in absolute truth when it comes right down to it in life. So what is truth? It's what corresponds to reality. Can truth be known? Try and deny it, and you affirm it. Is truth absolute? There's no way to escape it. Now let's answer some objections. Objection 1. Truth changes. What is true today may be false tomorrow. The progress of science is proof that truth is constantly changing. After all, we once believed the world was square. We now believe it's round. We once believed that the sun moved around us. Now we believe we move around the sun. I mean, everything changes. Truth changes, doesn't it? Earlier truth, the earth is flat. Later truth, the earth is round. Well, the answer to that is truth doesn't change. Truth does not change. The earth was always round. It wasn't once really square, and then it really turned round. The people were square. They thought it was square. Those who believed it was flat were in error, not in truth. There aren't two truths. One truth when they believed it was flat, and now another truth they believe it round. There's only one truth. It was always round, and they were wrong when they believed it was anything but that. Objection 2, belief in absolute truth is a narrow view. Now, my kindergarten teacher was narrow. Her name was Miss Knepple. I didn't name her. That was it, Miss Knepple. And she always used my middle name. I knew I was in trouble when she said, Norman Leo. I knew I was in trouble. And she'd say, Norman Leo, what's 2 plus 2? And I'd say, 5. whack on the hand with a ruler. Cruel and unusual punishment, but that's how we learned in those days, you know. You know what? She was so narrow-minded that if I said 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, or any number to infinity, I'd get an infinite number of whacks. That's pretty narrow, isn't it? I mean, of an infinite number of numbers, you think I could pick one I wanted, right? No, she was so narrow that if you didn't say 4, you were wrong. Don't you think that's pretty narrow-minded? That's exactly what truth is. It's very narrow. Response: truth is by its very nature narrow. If I say, this is a bottle of water in my right hand, that means that an infinite number of objects in the universe that I could be saying is there, it's all wrong, no matter what you say. You know, it's a pencil, it's a gun, you know, it's a rake. Everything else is wrong. There's only one way to be true, and there are an infinite number of ways to be wrong. Truth is by its very nature narrow. I am here means that I'm not anywhere else in the universe. Now, that's a little ridiculous, isn't it? Why can't I choose some other place in the universe? Because I'm here, and I'm not anywhere else. 4 plus 4 is 8, and only 8. It's not 7, 9, 10, or any other number. It's 8 and only 8. These are narrow, but they're true, and that's the way truth is. Absolute truth. Response: saying atheism is true is narrow, since it excludes all opposing views. I was debating an atheist at Rice University a number of years ago. His name was Dr. Michael Constantine Kalenda, and he was an atheist. He wrote a book titled Religion Without God. That's like romance without a spouse. And I wrote a book called Christian Apologetics. He held up my book and he said, you know, these Christians are narrow. You know what Geisler believes? He believes Christianity is true and everything else is false. That's pretty narrow. So when I got up, I said, you know, doctor, these humanists are really narrow. You know what Kalenda says in his book? He says humanism is true and everything else is false. These are really narrow-minded people. Get the point? If E is true, exclusivism, then all non-E is false. If C is true, Christianity, all non-C is false. If H is true, humanism, all non-H is false. Everybody who makes a truth claim is an exclusivist. He's excluding every other view. So saying atheism is true is about as narrow as you can get, because you're excluding every other view in the universe. Claiming skepticism is true is narrow, because you're excluding everything else except skepticism. Affirming pluralism is true is narrow, because if you say P is true, all non-P is false. All truth claims are narrow and exclusive. Then how come we get blamed as Christians with being the exclusivists when everybody else is an exclusivist too? I just love one time to be on Larry King Live when he asked these questions, you know. People have been trying to get me on there for years, but he never invites me. He always asks these people, say, well, you know, is Christianity the only true religion? Isn't that really narrow? You never get a good answer, almost never. And then when you do get a good answer, they don't know how to defend it. Objection 3, no one can have an absolute understanding of truth. Response: truth can be absolute without our having an absolute understanding of it. Who said I have to have an absolute understanding of truth in order for it to be absolute? My understanding is finite. Now we see through a glass darkly, then face to face. Something can be absolutely true without our having absolute evidence for it. You say, well, you have absolute evidence for God? No, I don't have to have. For there to be a God, I don't have to have absolute evidence. And for there to be truth, I don't have to have absolute understanding of it. Objection 4. Well, there are examples of relative truth. I always challenge my class to come up with one example of a relative truth, because what I'm concluding here tonight is not only is truth absolute, but there is no relative truth. There's no such thing as a relative truth. In fact, if you can think of one after, I'd be glad to entertain it. There are no examples of relative truths. Here are alleged examples of relative truths, but they all fail. Because whatever is true is always true for everyone everywhere, and always. What's a relative truth? Something is true for some people or in some places or at some times. What would an absolute truth be? Something is true for all people in all places and all times. So now that we know what an absolute truth is and what a relative truth is, can you give me an example of a relative truth? The answer is no. You can't give an example, and I'd be glad to take them in the question and answer period tomorrow. All people and all places and all times. Here's an example. Here's why. Whatever is true for all people in all places at all times. Take these two. This man feels cold and this man feels hot. Now, this man feels hot, that man feels hot is true for me up here. It's true for you down there. It's true for people on the equator. It's true for people at the North Pole. Because it's a state. What is truth? Truth is what corresponds to its object. And that man, in his circumstances, that man feels hot, it's a statement about his feeling, is absolutely true for everyone in the world everywhere, no matter where they are. And that man feels cold is absolutely true for everyone everywhere. You don't have to feel cold for that statement about that man, because truth is what corresponds to its object, and the object there is that man's feeling. And that is a statement about his feeling, which is true everywhere for all time. Did the sun once revolve around the earth? No. It's true at all times and all places. Truth didn't change. Our view did. Our view changed in the Copernican revolution. It's true in all places. This statement, it is cold at the North Pole and it's hot in Egypt, is true everywhere. Why? Because it's a statement about the North Pole. It's cold at the North Pole. And if you make that statement in Egypt, it's still true that it's cold at the North Pole. If you make that statement in hell, it would still be true that it's cold at the North Pole. Because it's a statement about the North Pole, not about Egypt or hell or any other place. The truth does not change when it's uttered in different geographical locations. I don't care where you go to utter it, it's still true because truth is what corresponds to its object. And its object is that place there, not where you are. Serious problems with relativism. Like an old apple, relativism may look good on the surface, but it's rotten at the core. Got a little protein there. Serious problems. Relativists believe that relativism is true for everyone. Oops. Because if it's true for everyone, everywhere, and at all times, what is it? It's not relativism, it's absolutism. And once the relativist claims that everyone should be a relativist, which is really the claim of our culture, he has become an absolutist. As a friend of mine said, they stand on the pinnacle of their own absolute and relativize everything else. You can't move the earth unless you have a stable place to put your fulcrum. They have to borrow our view. As Francis Schaeffer said, they're living on borrowed capital. They have to borrow our view to make sense out of their view. Relativism is self-defeating. The world would be full of contradictions if relativism were true. If something is true for me but false for you, then opposite conditions exist, since true is what matches its condition. But opposite conditions can't exist at the same time. Either this Bible is in my right hand or it's not in my right hand. It can't be both at the same time. Opposite conditions can't be true. But that's not possible. No one would ever be wrong about anything. Just think of it. If relativism were true, then no one in the history of the universe since Adam has been wrong about anything. Because if truth is always relative, then I can never be wrong. If someone claims I'm wrong, then I can just say it's wrong for them, but not for me. Relativism makes truth gaining impossible, makes education impossible. Do you know that if truth isn't absolute, you would never learn anything? If we can never be wrong, then we can never learn anything, because learning involves moving from what is not knowing the truth to knowing the truth. And if you really learned and went from not knowing to knowing the truth, then truth has to be absolute. If truth were relative, you would never be able to learn anything. No wonder the Apostle Paul said, ever learning and never coming to a knowledge of the truth. Objection. Comparisons are alleged to be relative. For example, being warmer, better, or taller is relative to time, space, and person. So surely that's a relative truth. No, it's not a relative truth. Saying Wilt Chamberlain is taller than Willie Shoemaker will always be true everywhere, all the time, and in all places. I don't care if you go in Africa and say it, if you go to Bongo Bongo and say it, Wilt Chamberlain is taller than Willie. That statement is about them and the relation between them, and it's absolutely true no matter where you go and make that statement about that object. The same is true of all other comparisons. Conclusion. Beliefs cannot change a fact, no matter how sincerely they're held. One can sincerely believe that the world is flat, but that just makes you sincerely wrong. That's all. I can sincerely believe that I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is near Highway 85. If I take 85 east to 95 and turn right on 95, then I can get to New York. Doesn't matter how sincere you are, you're going to end up in Miami, not New York. By the way, you know what 95 is called between New York and Miami? The Jewish Passover. Number 2, truth is transcultural. 3 plus 3 is 6 here, there, and everywhere. Some people are just getting that. It's a little slow, but it'll come. Confucius say, he who laughed last didn't understand joke. Truth is transcultural. You know, 3 plus 3 is true here, there, and everywhere. It's true of Peking, Moscow, wherever you go. It transcends culture. 3, do you know being raised in a given culture doesn't make their beliefs true? I was raised in the most racist city in the United States. You say, where were you? Birmingham, Alabama? No, Detroit, Michigan. We had 2 all-out race wars. I mean, guns, knives in the street. And while I was growing up, I don't know any other city that had that. It was a racist culture. So does that justify me being a racist because I was raised in a racist culture? What if you're raised a Nazi? They tried this at the Nuremberg trial. You know, they tried this argument. Well, I was a Nazi and I was just taking orders. They got Eichmann in South America and brought him over to Israel, tried him. They said, what's your justification? He said, well, I was a Nazi and I was obeying orders. Well, they gave him capital punishment, cremated him, threw his ashes in the Mediterranean. Being raised a Nazi doesn't make Nazism true. Being raised a racist doesn't make racism true. Do you know that one's attitude doesn't change the truth? Every once in a while you say, well, you people that hold this narrow view that Christ is the only way, you really got a bad attitude. I mean, you're arrogant. You think you got the truth in a suitcase, and that's just a bad attitude. Well, do you know your attitude doesn't change the truth? A bad attitude about truth doesn't make it an error. Suppose I have a bad attitude. My daughter had a history teacher with a bad attitude. She said, I can't stand history. I said, why? Because my teacher has such a bad attitude. Well, if your history teacher teaches you that Martin Luther tacked up his 95 Theses on October 31st, 1517, and he has a bad attitude, can you pick 1723 on October 29th because of that? No. A bad attitude doesn't change the truth. It doesn't make truth into error, and reverse. A good attitude doesn't change error into truth. Well, how about loving relationships? Josh McDowell has an excellent message, which he talks about how people who live in a non-loving relationship are not open to truth and they don't receive it as well. But one thing you have to be very careful is in not saying this, that truth is based in relationships. It's not, because relationships are subjective. Then you have objective truth based in a subjective thing. Basing truth in a loving relationship will enhance the acceptance of the truth, but it will not change the nature of the truth. It'll still either be true or false. I talked to a Mooney girl once. In fact, I was debating the top Mooney in the country, a guy named Richardson at Northwestern University. a guy who afterwards, by the way, left the Moonies. He came up to me after the debate and he said, "Boy, you really got me on some points there." And he was a Harvard PhD, which means phenomenally dumb. And he was defending them, and he realized he could no longer defend them, and he gave up defending them. But there was a Mooney girl saved after the debate, came to Christ. And she said, "You know, I never been loved so much in my life. These people loved all over me, and I just felt so at home and just felt a wonderful family feeling." So the error of Mooneyism was based in a loving relationship. The loving relationship doesn't change error into truth. It doesn't change truth into error. Basing truth in a subjective relationship does not change its objective nature, but only its subjective appeal. Now, granted, the Bible says you should speak the truth in love, and it's going to be a whole lot more appealing. That's like sugarcoating some bad medicine. I remember when we were kids, we had to take castor oil. Castor oil, when I saw it coming, I got better. You know, my mother just the spoon is coming at me, and I feel better, Mom. That's all right. Don't bother. They needed sugar-coated medicine. We didn't get it in our day. 6, contrary beliefs are possible, but contrary truths are not possible. There is no such thing as your truth or my truth. There is the truth. And if you don't have the truth, you don't have the truth. Contrary beliefs are possible. You can believe any cockamamie thing you want. You can believe there's a little green gremlin in here pushing these things, and a new second comes up on my dial every second. Doesn't make it true. 7, you can believe everything is true, but everything can't be true. Everything can't be true. Why? Because they're opposites, and opposites can't both be true. Objective truth can't be denied. The denial of objective truth makes a claim to be an objective truth. The claim there is no objective truth is an objective truth claim. So you can't deny truth is objective. You can't deny it's absolute. You can't deny its correspondence to reality. Truth is what corresponds to the facts. Truth can be known. What is true for everyone. Now that makes sense, because now I can open the Bible and say to someone, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes unto the Father but by me. That's true for everyone. That's not just true for Christians. And yet there are people, the surveys show that there is many people in our churches today who believe truth is relative as there are outside of our churches. No wonder that by age 23, 80% of our young people have left our churches. That's right. I was just speaking back to the Bible. They have a professional scientist on their staff taking surveys, and it's a proven fact that 80% of our young people will leave the church by age 23. Why? Well, because they didn't have much of a grasp on it to begin with, because 80% of them are relativists sitting in the pews. They believe, well, that's true for, maybe true for me, and maybe true for my mother, my father, the pastor, but it's not true for everyone. What will that do to missions? It will kill missions. Why? Because why go and talk to the Buddhist, the Hindu, when what's true for him is true for him, and it doesn't matter? You say, well, Jesus is true for me. Yeah, but do you really believe it's true for everybody? If you don't believe in absolute truth, it undermines everything we believe as Christians. It undermines that the Bible is truth, but that's just a truth. It undermines that Jesus is the only way, because he's just a way. I can't think of anything in our culture that is more important to pre-evangelize people on than truth.